All right, good afternoon. I have a statement on Guatemala. The Secretary General is deeply saddened by the tragic loss of life and significant damage caused by El Fuego volcano, which erupted yesterday in Guatemala. He extends his sincere condolences to the families of the victims and to the government and people of the country. He wishes a speedy recovery for all those who were injured. The United Nations stands in solidarity with Guatemala and is ready to support the national rescue and relief efforts. And this morning, the Secretary General spoke at an interactive civil society hearing on tuberculosis, where he stressed that to end TB, we must address the social drivers of the disease, namely poverty, inequality, and increasing rates of migration. He also emphasized the need to strengthen health systems, ensure universal health coverage, and address antimicrobial resistance. His full remarks are upstairs, or in my office, rather. And the Deputy Secretary General is in Gebze, Turkey, where she attended today the inauguration of the Technology Bank, which seeks to improve the use of scientific technological solutions to the world's poorest countries. The creation of the Technology Bank shows the global community's commitment to ensure that all countries can deploy the most advanced tools to achieve all of the Sustainable Development Goals, Ms. Mohammed said in a tweet. The inauguration of the Technology Bank also means that target 17.8 of the Sustainable Development Goals has been reached. The target aims to fully operationalize the Technology Bank science, technology, and innovation capacity building mechanism for least developed countries by 2017. And our colleagues from the peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic report that a Tanzanian peacekeeper was killed and 7 were wounded yesterday in the village of Dilapoko in Mambarekade Prefecture. This happened when a UN force patrol countered an ambush by presumed armed Syri fighters. On the 7 wounded peacekeepers, 1 is in critical condition and is receiving medical attention at the mission's military hospitals in Bangui, along with the 3 wounded, whose conditions is considered serious. The remaining 3 wounded peacekeepers are being treated in Berberati, and we should have a statement on this a little later today. Also, the UN mission in Afghanistan today condemned the attack that killed and injured religious scholars gathered in Kabul who were there to promote peace in Afghanistan. Such attacks must not deter collective resolve for a peaceful future for all Afghans, said the mission. And also in Afghanistan, UNICEF today released a study that found that nearly half of the children in Afghanistan between 7 and 17 are missing out on school. That's 3.7 million children. The study says that girls account for 60% of the out-of-school population, and in the worst affected provinces, up to 85% of girls are not going to school. Children are being driven away from the classroom by ongoing conflict, discrimination against girls, and displacement and child marriage. According to the report. More information is available on UNICEF's website. And the Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, is currently in Sana'a to discuss plans for the resumption of talks to end the conflict. He intends to present his framework for negotiations at the next Security Council briefing on June 18th. In parallel, the Special Envoy is discussing with the parties the steps they could take to de-escalate tensions, including near Hodeida. And on Libya, our humanitarian colleagues said today they're concerned by reports that clashes have now reached Derna city in eastern Libya. Clashes and shelling are already forced people from outlying areas into Derna city, with up to 1,300 households reportedly displaced out of May 30th. On that date, the formal entry and exit points located at Karsa, west of Derna, restored restricted opening, reportedly allowing some families to leave the city. However, the Libyan National Army reportedly continues to impose a ban on the entry of essential goods, including food items and fuel. Access to food has become a challenge in most of the areas of Derna, with widespread shortages of vegetable, fruit, milk, flour, and other staples reported. While electricity was restored the next day, on the 31st of May, after repairs to the city's main power plant, the water supply remains largely cut off. And our humanitarian colleagues said they're deeply concerned over reported of civilian casualties in northern Syria. as a result of indiscriminate attacks by armed opposition groups. At least 24 civilians have been killed and scores more injured in indiscriminate attacks reported in the past weeks in the Idlib and Hama governorate. This includes a spat of car bombs in Dana town in Idlib and Idlib city in the last week of May that reportedly killed 7 people and left over 50 injured. Today, 4 people were reportedly killed and others were injured when mortars reportedly hit the Al-Nil Street neighborhood in Aleppo. And UN continues to condemn attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure and the ongoing violence in populated areas that has led to continuing civilian suffering. We call on all parties to the conflict to protect civilians and facilitate humanitarian access as required under international humanitarian law. From Gaza, the UN officials and heads of agencies expressed their outrage over the weekend following the killing on Friday in Gaza of Razan al-Najjar, a 21-year-old woman volunteering as a first responder. This while carrying out her humanitarian duties with the Palestinian Medical Relief Society. 3 other people on her team were also injured. Humanitarian coordinator Jamie McGoldrick said that healthcare workers must be allowed to perform their duties without fear of death or injury. He said that the killing of a clearly identified medical staffer by security forces during a demonstration was particularly reprehensible. And from Jordan, I was asked about the recent protests in that country, and I can say that the United Nations supports Jordanians' right to peaceful protest and echoes His Majesty's King Abdullah's second call for a peaceful and inclusive national dialogue regarding the country's economic reform agenda. The United Nations, through its country office in Amman, is ready to support the newly appointed Prime Minister, Omar al-Razaz, and in this context, including supporting the inclusion of women, youth, civil society organizations in a national dialogue process. The UN reiterates its support for Jordan's ongoing efforts to implement economic and social reforms and appreciates its strategic role as a pillar of stability in a volatile region and safe haven for millions of refugees. And you will have seen that over the weekend we issued a statement on Mali in which the Secretary General said he was following with concern the developments in that country and the violent clashes sparked by the holding of demonstrations by opposition parties in Bamako. The Secretary General called for calm and restraint by all parties and urged political actors and civil society to favor dialogue to maintain an environment conducive to the holding of credible and transparent elections. And in Portugal, the World Health Organization and the country's Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, today launched a global action plan on physical activity. The plan shows how countries can reduce the physical inactivity of adults and adolescents by 15% by the year 2030. Worldwide, 1 in 5 adults and 4 out of 5 adolescents, 11 to 17 years, do not do enough physical activity. However, regular physical activity is key to preventing and treating non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, stroke, diabetes, breast, and colon cancer. And speaking of physical activity, I wanted to flag that yesterday the UN celebrated World Bicycle Day for the first time. Bicycling is a way to foster sustainable development as it promotes mental and physical health, prevents disease, cuts down on carbon emissions, and takes stress out. On that note, I'd like to mention an initiative that encourages all of us to be more sustainable. The Be the Change Week, organized by the Department of Public Information, started today at UN headquarters. The initiative is a 5-day sustainability challenge for UN staff to live more in line with the SDGs. Each day, participants will be presented with tips on leading a healthy lifestyle, and there'll also be events here that include a green fair tomorrow and shoreline cleanup on World Oceans Day. More information online. And today is the International Day of Innocent Children Victims of Aggression. The purpose of the day is to acknowledge the pain suffered by children throughout the world who are victims of physical, mental, and emotional abuse. And lastly, ahead of tomorrow, which is, besides being Tuesday, it is World Environment Day. You may have seen on Twitter that the Secretary General is participating in the hashtag Beat Plastic Pollution Challenge, in which users pledge to replace single-use plastics with reusable alternatives. On Twitter, the Secretary General pledged to abolish the use of plastic bottles in his office, and he did that starting today. So we've removed all plastic bottles from the conference rooms upstairs. and we've removed them here a while ago. We hope you remove them from your offices. Yalla. Masood.
Thank you, Stéphane. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask you, why has the Secretary General been so quiet on the killing of the Palestinian nurse who was killed by the Israeli Defense Forces? Even the Israelis say they're going to investigate it.
I think
their calls that it should be investigated by some international investigation commission because they do not trust ultimately what Israel will come up with.
First of all,
why is the Secretary General so quiet?
First of all, as if you just heard, the United Nations is far from silent on this issue. The heads of UN agencies that operate in the occupied Palestinian territory issued a statement, which I just referred to. We obviously welcome the news that there would be an investigation. We look forward to seeing the results of it, but I think the UN has been anything but quiet on the issue.
Obviously, it was such an egregious crime that even the Israelis recognized it, and that my question is, why is the Secretary General? I mean,
I just answered your question. The people who represent the Secretary General on the ground have spoken out and forcefully on the issue, and he, of course, shares their concern.
Follow-up.
Yes, sir.
Why not Mr. Mladenov say something?
Mr. Mladenov did say something over the weekend.
I saw that what he wrote in his Twitter.
Right.
That is not enough. His thoughts and his prayers only.
No, I think...
when he spoke in the Security Council, he said, please join me to unequivocally condemn the Palestinians. That's what he said, the Palestinian military,
I think
of course.
Anyone who looks,
why he doesn't use the same language
anyone who looks at the track record of Mr. Mladenov in condemning the killings of civilians, I think is unquestionable. He shares the sentiments expressed by his colleagues, and I think the tweet also was very clear in calling out, calling on Israel to calibrate its use of force.
Can you explain what does he mean by calibrate?
I think
that to use force, but to measure it well. Is that what he means?
As a matter of use of force should be proportional, and I think him and the UN team have been very clear on the issue. Matthew.
I wanted to ask about the statement about Mali over the weekend. There's some dispute about, you say he's following it closely, so I wanted to know, is it the UN's understanding that the authorities used, quote, only tear gas or live fire? And the second question is, it seems that a lot of the protests are about IBK, I'll just say it that way, running again. Right. And I know that he announced that he was going to run literally just less than 24 hours before the Secretary General arrived. So I wanted to know two things. One, is it viewed as proper? Was there any kind of, I don't want to say coordination, but obviously if you were a leader seeking a controversial additional term, it would be nice to announce it right before the arrival of the Secretary General. Does he have any thoughts on the timing of that announcement, and what type of force is being used by the authorities since he's covering it so closely?
The timing was solely any question about timing should really refer to the government of the president of Mali. We had obviously nothing to do with the timing. Leaders are free to time their announcement whenever they wish. As always, and as a matter of principle, as I've just said, there is a right to demonstrate peacefully, and the forces of law and order need to use proportional force if there is any violence.
Can I ask also one about it seemed to me that the Secretary General said on Friday that he will be in Moscow on June 20th for the Portugal-Morocco game, and he called it an official visit. Can you give some more? When does it begin? When does it end?
It begins around the time of the game, and we'll have a bit more of an official announcement for the official visit closer to the official.
Are there any other stops on the trip?
Everything will be announced in due course, sir.
Okay.
You've been very patient. Your microphone. You have to press the.
Sorry.
There we go.
Good afternoon. My name is Deepak Arora with the Tribune Online. A couple of days ago, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte had asked the UN human rights expert to go to hell, and he warned UN against interference, domestic interference in his country. Now, Diego Garia Sayan, Special UN Representative on the independence of judges and
The special rapporteur, yes.
Yes, languages, and on Friday had criticized the dismissal of Supreme Court Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno. Can I have the comments of the Secretary General on this harsh language?
The special rapporteurs are a very important and critical part of the UN's human rights architecture. They are appointed by the Human Rights Council. They do not report to the Secretary General, and they're appointed as independent experts. So they are free to do their work within the framework of their mandate. So it's not a Secretary General to comment on what the Special Rapporteur said. We believe that every member state should respect the work of the Special Rapporteurs and should participate in the important work of the UN human rights architecture. And as a matter of principle, I think the Secretary General is always for civility as opposed to incivility. Sir.
Thank you, Stéphane. The new Interior Minister of Italy, Matteo Salvini, that he's in charge of the migration crisis, he declared that the ONG, the organization that tried to save people on the Channel of Sicily on the Mediterranean. Well, yesterday he said practically that they are the equivalent of trafficker. They trafficking people. They help he called them deputy.
So
deputy
what is the question?
So
Stefano?
the question, of course, the question is what the Secretary General thinks about the ONG. They're helping to rescue the migrants, and also. In his declaration, the Interior Minister say also the problem is going to be resolved, has to be resolved in keeping those migrants in the country. Let me just finish.
Yeah, but I'd like to hear the question.
I understand.
I've seen
and
what
there
has
is
been
a
said.
question is because there was the Secretary General in this room about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, that he declared that the country does not respect international law if it asks to another country that cannot hold those migrants or refugees, if it asks to hold them.
So a couple of points I'd like to make. The work of NGOs in saving and protecting lives of refugees and of migrants who make very dangerous crossings in the Mediterranean, trying to, in many other parts of the world, is very important. It's very important to the safety of these people. And it's a work that the UN system works a lot with these NGOs. There is a bigger issue here at play, and is how do we deal with this mass movement of people that we are seeing, the greatest mass movement of people we're seeing since the Second World War. And that's exactly the point of the work that's being done even this week, if I'm not mistaken, in New York on the Global Migration Compact, where countries of origin, countries of destination, countries of transit need to come up with a framework which places really the safety and the dignity of human beings at its heart, while always respecting the sovereignty of member states. And we would encourage all countries to actively participate in this dialogue. Masoud.
Stéphane, two questions. Number one was this about, do you have any update about Yemen and the plight of the Yemenis? Obviously, over the weekend there was some report that there were some killings around the port area of Aden and so forth.
Well, I mean, I gave you the update that I had on Yemen, which is basically that Martin Griffiths is in country trying to, especially focusing quite a bit on the situation around Hodeidah. We have been on a regular basis here highlighting the disastrous humanitarian situation in Yemen due to the ongoing fighting and the grave risks of escalation of that situation or deterioration of that situation if the fighting around Hodeidah intensifies, and we will continue to do that.
On Afghanistan, which you had given an update earlier, on Afghanistan, but there have been attacks going on between Pakistan and Afghan militants and forces attacking inside Pakistan. Have you had any update from the United Nations on this?
Abdelhamid.
Thank you again. Every killing of any civilian should be condemned across the board. I agree with you. I want to ask if possible to compare between the language Mladinov used on January 8th when a settler was killed and when this nurse had been murdered. Look at the language, how he used there, with condemned with the strongest term.
What is the question?
Why he doesn't use the same yardstick? Why he doesn't use the same?
I think
why there are two different measures when a Palestinian is murdered?
There are no different measures when when civilians are killed. Yes, sir. Yeah. Your microphone, please.
Thank you, Stéphane. This is Deepak Arora again. I'm happy to see that tomorrow, June 5th, Environment Day, is not another ceremonial day, and you have agreed to remove plastic bottles from this building, Now, the other day, last month actually, I had gone to graduation ceremony of Parsons, the design school, at the stadium, which was US Open, and 1,600 students were graduating. I was happy to learn that each gown was made from 900 plastic bottles.
Great.
Multiplied by 1,600.
A
beautiful measure.
I appreciate the sartorial news, but what is the question?
The question is that would you suggest some measure from UN so that this sustainable development, idea?
I think the building, as it was renovated, consumes a lot less energy than it did before. We're always looking at ways to reduce our carbon footprint, either as an individual or as an organization. Mr. Lee.
Sure, thanks a lot. I want to ask about Cyprus, Cameroon, and this program budget implication issue. On Cyprus, the President's Security Council, Ambassador Nebenzia, said on Friday when I asked him about Cyprus that he didn't think that this, even an interim envoy, would move forward until some political events took place, which I took to mean elections in Turkey. And I wanted to ask you point blank, I guess, because there was basically Jane Hall-Lute was welcomed by one side, and then you said we have nothing to announce. Can you just give us sort of a sense of what's led to the?
It's a case of people speculating without any official announcement from our part. We will announce what we need to announce when we feel the situation is ready. And I'm not, Cyprus, as most of the issues we deal with are delicate and complex, and I'm not going to try to look into the future, say if and when we're going to announce
What about a quick look into the past, not on speculation, but just to understand how things work? It's my understanding that the Secretary General tried to send Mr. Guéno to Cyprus as an envoy, and he was rejected on the grounds that he's an EU member. And I wanted to know, is it true? Does the UN accept that one of the parties of interest in the Cyprus matter now determines that EU members can't be envoys?
I'm not going to get into whatever discussions may be had, but it's a obvious answer that the UN will not propose an envoy or a mediator or a negotiator between parties if both parties don't agree to that person.
Right.
But on Mr. Guéno, I have no specific
But could
comment.
is there a situation in which a party could announce a systematic banning of a certain category
every
from
case,
a continent?
every case is
All right.
looked at.
I wanted to ask you on Cameroon. You'd said last week, and thanks for the statement that the country team was asking about things in Menka and arrest. I looked at it. I thought I'd missed it. I think you just said we take note of this sentencing for 15 years. Today, there's 5 more people being put up to sentencing, including a woman that's her alleged crime was filming in a prison. And I wanted to know, are you in taking note of these sentences? Does that mean there's something wrong with sentencing someone to jail for filming? And number 2 has there been any response by the government to the inquiry?
I'll check with our team. I don't have anything else.
And the final thing on PBI, thanks a lot. I just wanted to get to the bottom of this. I tried to ask the Secretary General, it didn't obviously work, so I'm going to ask you. The resolution as adopted by the General Assembly says that the Secretary General should present an implementation plan, including on the authorization of its funding arrangements before the end of the 72nd session. And then when I asked yesterday your colleague, Mr. Varma, it seemed like this is being kicked to the 73rd. So I wanted to know when is the plan?
Something I should know, which I don't, so I will try to find out.
Okay.
Masood, then we'll go to Mr. Varma.
Thank you. Stéphane, just want to know, is the United Nations in the loop on President Trump's on-again, off-again, and meeting?
The summit is one that is not being organized or hosted or negotiated by the United Nations. The Secretary General is aware of what's going on. Thank you, Mr. Varma. I will leave the hot desk.